Welcome back to the Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and always a pleasure to welcome back to the program my good friend Ann Coulter. You've heard my side of this. I think all of this stuff is crazy, and I almost wake up ready to believe that almost anything that gets reported in the news is no longer crazy. It's just the latest development in the country, like the fact that they now have parts of a major city in Seattle that are simply off limits. They've been taken over in somewhat the same way, and I'm sure Ann will appreciate this comparison, that some of the parts of other big world cities have been taken over by certain religious groups that have said, no, the regular authorities don't apply here. This is almost a different country. And is the whole country, Ann, becoming a different country, or is this just a false impression conveyed by these relatively small numbers of Americans who are in the streets of major cities?
Well, it doesn't matter that there aren't that many of them. What matters is that these figures of authority are backing down to them and granting all of their demands. That's what makes this different from other outbursts of anarchist and communist violence, which, as I say in my column, the last time the country went through a lot of these sorts of convulsions. It was at the first time they did was at the turn of the century, with all of the immigrants coming in who were anarchists and communists, mailing bombs and shooting at police. But Americans liked America then, so they cracked down. There were the famous Palmer raids. The Haymarket rioters were 7 of the 8 sentenced to death. They cracked down on it, and by the way, the Palmer raids were under a Democratic president. Both parties in the country liked the country. Now we don't, and we've been living with 50 years of the Democrats bringing in the third world in order to staff the battalions, and we're getting third world riots because we're becoming a third world. Which is maybe why Republicans should stop saying, "Oh, immigration, it's just one issue. It's just one of many issues." No, how did you go from the state that gave us Ronald Reagan, who smashed the riots at Berkeley, and Nixon, who pretty much ended the anti-war protests? He wasn't responsible for Kent State, but he was president then. And by the way, the governor who did preside over the shootings at Kent State, which pretty much put an end to the violent student riots, despite, the sobbing and weeping on Wikipedia and NPR, he ended up being the longest-serving governor of Ohio, perhaps one of the longest-serving governors in the country, though he did take a break and run for, I don't know, Senate or something. Nixon, after Kent State was reelected in the hugest landslide to that point in history, allow the rest of us to say, to tut, but keep us safe. No, not anymore. Now we have a governor of California he's so delighted the mall in front of the state capitol has been painted with Black Lives Matter. And Governor Garcetti of Los Angeles taking a knee with the Black Lives Matter protesters. Well, that's because Reagan or Nixon couldn't be elected in California anymore. You always see on MSNBC, I see, as a regular watcher, the Democrats boasting about how, and the blacks and the browns, the coalition of the blacks and the browns, they're all voting for us. Well, what goes unstated is, yeah, that's true. There's only one ethnic group that will ever vote majority Republican, and that is white people. That's why they want to cancel whites. That's why they're bringing in non-white immigrants from very dysfunctional cultures to support the riots and to vote for Democrats who will not punish the riots. That's what's different this time. I mean, the rioters, the idiots, the lunatics, you will always have with you, but a sane, civilized society punishes them, tries them, puts them in prison. Oh, no. You're reading city after city is just releasing all of these rioters, releasing the looters. Did you see the Second Circuit in New York? I mean, this is why you have to vote for Trump, for the courts and the courts alone. Who knows if it'll help getting him elected again, but at least the Federal Society is running the course. The district court judge, I believe it was a Clinton appointee, I'm not sure. I looked it up at the time. the immigrants who threw Molotov cocktails into a cop car, and only that would have murdered 20 people right there. That is a direct murder of policemen. Yes, immigrant did that. She goes before the district court judge, federal crime, and the charge of the explosive charge was dismissed. The charge was dropped to something like
on what basis?
Not following orders of a police officer or some silly thing. Well, that got appealed to the Second Circuit, and God bless the Second Circuit, they reinstated the more serious charge. But I mean, that is the difference this time versus other times, which is why it's not going to stop.
But the thing I don't understand about any of this, and there are lots of policies that the left pushes, and you say that one's going to come back around to bite them on the backside at some point. And oftentimes we see them do that. Like when they push, they say, look, you've got to make sure that, power relationships between men and women working together, we can't tolerate even consensual, sexual relations. And then all of a sudden Bill Clinton comes along and goes after an intern, and you say, oh, no, we forgot to tell you there's an exception when it's just personal, then the power differential between an intern and a president is not to be regarded. So they get bit by their own policies. This one, though, bites hard and it bites fast against the very group they say they're advocating for, which is poor Americans, of whom a disproportionate number are black Americans. And when you say, let's reduce the police force, and I say to myself, looking at a distance, thank God, I lived in L.A. as a little teeny kid and went to elementary school in Inglewood, of all places, which is not a very nice neighborhood right now. I say, you reduce the cops there? They're already seeing in the first week of May a massive increase. First week of June, massive increase in murder, 250%, shootings up 56%. And you say, now, where do you think most of those shootings and murders are going to happen? They're going to happen in poor neighborhoods, which are disproportionately black. So what happens when the feedback loop?
The mob doesn't care about that. You're using logic and thinking that, different ethnic groups are going to go to the candidates debate and compare their positions and think, well, I like this guy's positions more than this. No, they aren't. They vote like a mob. And if you don't vote for the Democrat, no, we vote for Democrats. We vote for Democrats. That's why Democrats are so excited about just dumping third worlders on the country. I'm not saying that we can't assimilate them. We, eventually assimilate, even Germans and Scandinavians and Italians. But it takes about 100 years. Any immigrant coming to this country is by definition making the country less free. It's also, as I point out in this week's column, making it more mob-like and more riotous.
Well, and there's the other objection I've got, Ann, and I understand. I'm using logic, and I'm sorry. I have to apologize for that up front. But when I see the mayors and governors saying, we have to listen to the community, and they're describing a group of people that is a tiny, tiny fraction. The mob in the street in most of these places, Seattle, for example, 4 million metro population, you've got maybe 10,000 people in the streets. Do the math, and the mayors and governors are saying, we have to listen to the community. Well, the community is this tiny group of a few thousand people out of 4 million people, and you say, hold on a second, if that's the community, what are the rest of us, the other 99.9% of us? Who are we? And they say, well, you're just the folks who pay the bills.
No, it's all window dressing so that they get power. We've seen it over and over again in the French Revolution, in the Soviet Union, in Cuba, in Venezuela. They climb on the backs of the very working class and the poor people that you're describing who are going to be hurt the most. Climb on their backs to power and get to live like Fidel Castro. They're perfectly happy with this, and you're absolutely right. It is a very small portion right now who are the crazy ones. I mean, one weird thing about Antifa is how many of them are transgenders. How many transgenders are there?
Well, exactly. I think it's 2/3 of 1%. You got to read her column, Why You No Longer Recognize Your Country. It's Ann Coulter, the author of so many great books, including Resistance is Futile, How the Trump-Hating Left has Lost Its Collective Mind. And if you don't believe me, they've lost their minds, just take a look at the news coverage tonight. You'll see video evidence of it.